Hey Exile, it's me Pat of Exile. Patch notes are out and they are a doozy. There's just so much, and while I'd love to cover everything, the point is most of these, while important, aren't that interesting. So I'm mostly going to be focusing on things that leapt out at me. The absolute highlight of this whole patch for me is that a bunch of gens just ceased to exist. My favorite one, Grim Feast.
He's already dead.
Absolutely deserved a beating. We have an entire video talking about the value that Grim Feast gave to Energy Shield. And now it's gone, and I mean the video is also useless now. There's also a general attack on the support structure surrounding Energy Shield focused builds, but not on Energy Shield itself. The shield itself and the ways you can get it are mostly the same. But if you want to get extra value out of it, it's gonna hurt a little bit. Eldritch Battery, for example, now doubles mana cost, so you can get value off your Energy Shield, but it's gonna cost you. Also, Lich is coming out, which really likes the existence of Energy Shield and the things around it, so it's not surprising that everything around it is taking a hit. There is also a change to conversion. Setting a stat to a specific value such as Chaos Inoculation or Blood Magic now occurs before conversion is applied to that stat, rather than being ignored by conversion. So I feel like we're gonna see how it actually interacts, but I feel like that's how they're hitting Everlasting Gaze, which by all means probably shouldn't be working as it is, although even that got a nerf. It now gives you much less Energy Shield before, 46% down from 20 to 30%, but increases your mana regeneration rate and increases your maximum mana by a wider margin from a flat 50 to a range of 40 to 60. But we'll see how that all turns out. Oh, and Skeleton Warriors also vanished, which is funny because nobody thought that Skeleton Warriors was doing anything bad. But now they live exclusively in scepters, and you know, the Skeleton Warriors that exist in your scepter as a skill can now be assigned more spirits, so you can get more of it going. Shock Siphon also sacrificed to the gods of Rayclast because it made Energy Shield easy to restore. I feel like they're also hitting mostly ways to restore Energy Shield efficiently, so it becomes more in line with life. Additionally, anything that touches mana and could affect Archmage plus Energy Shield efficiency has been retuned. Even items can't give you as much mana. The amount of damage that Archmage can give you, much lower. The extra cost, slightly higher. But everybody saw that coming, which is going to be upsetting because the main question people had for Archmage was, if we did not have Archmage, what do Sorcerers get? I guess we'll find out. But Archmage is not the only thing to suffer. Invokers, as a whole, got a bit of a hit. Protect Me From Harm, for example, which turns a bit of your evasion into armor, but at the cost of some evasion, now costs you a little bit more evasion, which is fair. I should not be able to get armor off my evasion and still evade for 90%. Acrobatics was also nerfed similarly. Begone Omni-Defensible Monk. More importantly, Lead Me Through Grace has been nerfed, providing less spirit overall. The maximum value continues to be largely overkill, so it probably won't matter for the vast majority of people. Even endgame builds do not really need maximum value out of it, although it is nice. Where that nerf will matter is in the mid to early endgame. It just won't be as comfortable, which is fine, but it'll still likely be optimal. You just don't get to do whatever you want anymore. There is also a general trend that nerfs cast on shock, as anything that could say reduced shock duration has had that line removed or replaced, which makes sense. If shock wears off faster, you can reapply the shock more, getting meta charges faster. And while on that note, meta skills as a whole have been nerfed, reducing the amount of energy they generate to a slightly painful degree. Personally hurtful, but probably a smart call, honestly. Oh, and grenades died for some reason, maybe because the crossbow got a fat damage bump, but now most grenades have a longer fuse. Tangentially, Shatterscott was also nerfed. Fortunately, the one grenade build that I do use, flash grenades, actually got a buff, so that's happy. Yippee! Oh, and attribute stacking is over? Anything that stacks attributes has been gotten, like Polymathy and even Moriar has been nerfed. The Pillar of the Caged God has been nerfed. Hoa has been nerfed. The Gemling nodes have been changed. Packed it in, my Gemling Flicker Strikers. The dream is over. Monk Flicker still probably works, there's that, but it almost certainly does not run with Pillar of the Caged God anymore. Or did it ever? Maybe? I don't know. Either way, it got stomped, but there's a lot of math to look at. Now, I know I'm mostly focusing on nerfs, but there were a lot of buffs as well, mostly to how you can apply ailments faster, and that's great. But honestly, these are changes that leapt out at me because these are changes that will flatten the curve rather than create more spikes in it, making more things playable in a sense. Anyway, those are the ones that jumped out at me. Let me know which changes jumped out at you in the comments below. Anyway, time for baseless predictions. Foreseeable impact. There's a lot of additions and changes, but it all seems to be pointing towards two things: more focused builds and slower gameplay. Charges, power charges, frenzy charges, and funny third thing come out more slowly, but charge effects hit a lot harder, which tells me that single button builds may not be as sustainable. If a skill is less reliable or has less uptime because you can't make charges as consistently, or you need to use a different skill to create charges, it may be more efficient to just use different skills more than forcing the issue. Overall, I still think that's going to slow down play because it's going to take more time and effort to just create your power spikes mid-play. An additional reason I think our spikes are going to get much weaker is because elemental curses such as conductivity have been beaten, lowering their effectiveness by around 7%, with the chaos version of it getting a whopping 12 to 16% nerf. That's a lot of nerfing. While very endgame builds did take out these curses because they effectively did not give as much damage as other options, this does mean that the mid game is going to be a bit more of a slog, or at least slower if not a slog. It might still be fun, I don't know. Ailments across the board have also been buffed per skill, but harder to apply in general. Like freeze now builds up less, but if a skill applies freeze, it applies way more of it. That means we're rewarded more for deep investment into applying a single ailment rather than sprinkling in random stuff. At least for freeze, but it's probably at an okay level for the other ways of CCing. Anyway, more importantly, I know this all seems like a lot has changed, and it is a lot of pages. But the thing is, I think this is rather gentle for the most part, except for the gems that were just Thanos snapped. That was brutal. Why do I say that? Because the builds are still playable. It's just that because of these nerfs, the line between great play and an exploit is just slightly thicker. And honestly, I don't blame people who will quit the game because their build got nerfed. I don't get it, personally, but I do not blame them. It's something you invested into and now it's gone, and you likely can't rebuild it as the leagues go by. But, and again, I'm not judging you, you may have just been addicted to the power fantasy, and the good news about that is that I assure you, something is always going to be broken because a perfectly balanced game is perfectly fucking boring. And if the game ends up being like that, it won't be anybody's problem anymore. Thanks for watching. Thanks for passing by. I'm on Twitch, PanNerdTV, Pat of Exile, Panator. Let's do better.